Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. Prime Minister-elect Narendra Modi has invited the heads of the governments of all South Asian states to attend his swearing-in on Monday. In a gesture which diplomats and experts said was without precedent, no world leader has been invited to attend past swearings-in what has traditionally been seen as a domestic event. Should we see this as a bold step to embark on a policy of regional engagement? The BJP and its allies have won 336 seats in the 543-member Lok Sabha, the biggest mandate in 30 years. SAARC nations include India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. The BJP has indicated that Mr. Modi will work to a recrafted foreign policy. He repeatedly tore into the Congress-led UPA government's foreign policy in his election speeches as stagnant and weak. Today on Insight, we are asking our panelists the big foreign policy challenges for the new Prime Minister. And joining me for more on this very esteemed guest with me, former Dean of Jindal School of International Affairs, Professor Sreeram Chaulia. Thank you very much, Professor Chaulia, for joining us in this program. So you're saying, as far as the campaign speeches are concerned, we should not be carried away with whatever a particular leader says. At times it's high on rhetoric and low on substance. But Professor Chaulia, your take on this diplomatic move. Is this a very strong move by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Prime Minister-designate Narendra Modi?
I call it hitting the ground running. He's known to surprise a lot of people and to keep his cards close to his chest. And over well-honed political career, more than 12 years as Chief Minister, I think we have seen him often, coming up with new and fresh, novel ideas. So this is a welcome step, I think. Imagine having, whether it's a bilateral or a summit or whatever, on the sidelines. Definitely, if a head of state or head of government is visiting, he will have a one-on-one as well. So I think it shows that he means that diplomacy and foreign policy, one, will be important priority for him. And that it's not necessarily going to be second fiddle to domestic issues. And secondly, I think is also, in a way, personal rapport with leaders at the top sometimes works. I mean, in Vajpayee's time, certainly he believed in that. The idea of, knowing somebody and believing in them on a one-to-one human level. So maybe this also means for him to assess and gauge. He is known to be a very sharp reader of human psyches. Right. So hopefully this is all part of the game plan.
This is indeed a first. So the man who chose to give himself the outsider's tag is all set to head the Indian government, and not just the country but the world awaits with bated breath for Mr. Modi to unveil his foreign policy approach. What will Modi do on foreign policy? Narendra Modi was boycotted by the West for years over religious riots that occurred in Gujarat in 2002 when he was Chief Minister. He was placed on a visa blacklist by the US and European government over the riots that killed more than 1,000 people. Coming straight to you, Professor Chaulia. Now, US and Europe, we have seen their reactions so far. The US leader also congratulated Mr. Modi. How this is going to affect relations with specific countries? Pakistan, China, US, Israel, also Bangladesh. He said the first bilateral visit might happen with Bangladesh, especially on Teesta Treaty.
See, I think the overall reaction, if you gauge, is a positive one. And at the end of the day, the massive verdict of the public, and people respect it, even overseas. They realize somebody has won such a landslide victory. He must have done something good, and he must represent something good. It can't just be, a fluke to get such a huge majority. So I think people generally bow to the democratic process and his victory in that sense overseas. And secondly, I mean, everyone has to work with India and so there are a lot of expectations also about Mr. Modi overseas. If you see, the Chinese are saying that he is India's Nixon and all that. Of course, in the West, as you said, in the past there was animosity towards him because of the 2002 violence, religious violence. But I think now it's like, so now that he's no longer representing a region but the whole country, I think everyone is going to fall in line and will try to extract from the American point of view.
Will he be more pragmatic in his approach?
Yeah, so for example,
arrived that the fact that he was earlier denied visa by the US authorities. Do you think will he put development before ideology? Your assessment?
No, sure. I mean, right now, US-India bilateral trade, goods and services, over 100 billion. And knowing Mr. Modi, who places a premium on commercial diplomacy, he's going to go all out to try and double it, in the next 5 years. And he's a very ambitious politician who sets targets and achieves them. So I have no doubt about that. In fact, the Americans may also be salivating at the prospect that because of his promise to reduce the red tape, there may be more opportunities for foreign investment and market access for American companies. Remember, last few years, Americans had soured with Manmohan Singh regime, especially the chambers of commerce, saying that we are not getting, as much monetary value in India as we had expected. So I think the fact that Modi is seen to be as a kind of more of a conservative politician or a liberal, neoliberal politician may actually come to his advantage vis-a-vis the Americans.
Should we also expect a shift from India-US to India-China and India-Japan ties as far as greater consolidation of India-China and India-Japan ties? Narendra Modi might look for better options in the Asian continent than actually going the other way?
Sure, as long as we don't have Daulat Beg Oldie kind of incidents again, I'm sure he's going to try and do the same with the Chinese as well, which is to rev up the trade and the investment and to take it to a different level. But also, remember, multipolarity is one of the central pillars, stated goals of our foreign policy, and working with China on issues, as well as with the BRICS grouping, as well as with other formations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, some of which have an anti-Western orientation, is not at all anathema to us. In fact, we work very closely with all of them. Okay. And I think Modi is going to accelerate this because at the end of the day, it's not about whether we are close to Chinese or Americans. Is India a great power in its own right?
Alleged, right? So common security challenges, common economic challenges, and that has to be addressed as far as India, the bigger partner in the SAARC region, is concerned. That's an interesting point, as Mr. Sikri pointed out. The past government, UPA 2, was not paying much attention to the SAARC neighbors in comparison to the West. Even the way we have responded on several key issues, be it Egypt, be it Syria, or even on very important, be it even important summits for that matter. Do you think we'll see a shift with the new government, more proactive, more vocal on important issues?
Proactivity is much needed. I think often we have very ad hoc and reactive policies, and it's important that we have key point persons for important regions and also issues thematically, and to push sometimes. See, often we don't table the first proposal, or we don't try to do the rule making at the global institutions. We are not necessarily the most active in lobbying and creating consensus behind the scenes which lead to final solutions on big global security or economic problems. So I'm hoping, key institutions like the G-20, of course BRICS, but also other wider global security institutions where we have been seen to be absent or missing in action, that we will make a thrust towards it, because at the end of the day, to attain a great power status, we cannot just confine ourselves to our neighborhood. The very technical definition of great power is one which has significant influence far away from its own borders. So Africa, Latin America, Ambassador mentioned, very important. It's a fact that Gujarat, the state of Gujarat, generated 60% of our trade, of India's trade with Latin America. So under Mr. Modi, all the Latin American missions in Delhi are all gung-ho and upbeat about it. So I think the further we go and the further we are seen as influential and making a difference to their problems and to be seen to be taking global responsibilities rather than just pursuing our own narrow national interests, I think the greater will our soft power, and it will create an image of not just Modi as a world leader, but of India.
Right, so broaden. Professor Chaulia, your comments, as Mr. Sikri just mentioned, about the fact that most of our foreign policy decisions were influenced by US. It shouldn't happen during Narendra Modi's tenure, and we should be very well cautious of how we react on several important issues.
Yeah, I mean, see, self-respecting wannabe great power has to, show where the red lines are. I mean, Dr. Manmohan Singh was, I think, needlessly cognizant of American interests and preferences to an excessive extent. I mean, just look at all this huge national security agency spying. It almost went unnoticed under the carpet. They didn't even raise a hue and cry. Look what the Brazilians did. The Brazilians showed that they have aspirations.
And the MEA responded, calling it a routine cyber scrutiny.
Exactly. So, see,
he's lost his seat.
Right. So he's lost his seat. In fact, many of his ministers have already.
So self-respect and mutual dignity is important. Sovereign equals, and more importantly, I think, as I said before, for us now it's about we should not be taken for granted That had happened very late in the day over Devyani. We finally made a fuss, but I think it was very late. We should have been stronger and more affirmative in saying, stop, you can't go beyond this limit. So I think we need to tell them that, and the same holds for the Chinese. I mean, I have no love lost. We have no love lost with them, and the Chinese continue to pose serious security threats across our border, and they continue to. I think even when we talk about SAARC, inviting SAARC leaders, I think one hopeful strategy or game plan behind it is to also consolidate the region and to prevent, because there used to be an Indira doctrine way back in the 70s and 80s that was to keep away the Americans from the region and for us to be a kind of like a benevolent hegemon.
Okay.
And now I think we are looking beyond the region, far beyond, because we are looking at a global, India as a global power. But what is important is that the region should remain free of pressure tactics on the Chinese. How we are able to achieve it and how we are able to ensure that this region remains democratic.
So it will be. So confrontation is not really an answer. Dialogue is the way forward. But then he'll have a very firm approach towards dealing with Pakistan and even China on critical issues. But again, the question is terrorism. What if India is provoked? How will the new government respond?
I think we need to have, as Ambassador Sikri said, some preemptive as well as retaliatory capabilities that go beyond conventional means like amassing the army at the border like we did last in 2001, Operation Parakram and all that. I think there are surgical statecraft does accept some degree of usage of violence, and it's not illegal or immoral. And we go back to our traditions, to Kautilya and so on. There are means. So, for example, I think we must send out a message that certain actions are just not acceptable and that costs are going to be high. So I'm gladdened that some people with operations backgrounds from intelligence bureau and so on are being considered for very high level positions in the Modi administration. I'm sure those with operations background will be able to do certain things which can be lethal but which can be on the basis of deniable cover. We need to be able to build these things even if it involves some kind of condemnation. The fact is the whole world understands now. We have built up the case. We have the moral support. The point is it's not been executed because of lack of political will. So if Prime Minister says, let us carry out a covert operation and take out some of the leaders of these terrorist groups who are coming out in open public spaces and giving out sermons in mosques, I think we should be able to execute those things. And these are the ways. Do
you think military will play a much stronger role now?
I hope so. I think military diplomacy is there. The use of, for example, Navy. There's so much emphasis on Navy these days, on naval races and naval supremacy in the high seas and so on. So I think we must invest much more in the Navy and make it integral to our foreign policy, both for commercial reasons and also, more importantly, in order to counter any kind of encirclement of the country. So these are the ways in which we will need to emphasize the military has to have a role. Military, for example, our defense spending is not unrelated to foreign policy.
Right.
I mean, it's a joke. It's 1.5% or something of GDP. So, on the other hand, there are people saying, more needs to spend on development and welfare and all those things. The point is we need to, if we want to be a great power, minimum 3% allocation to GDP, and that too well and smartly spent.
We're planning greater consolidation, many multilateral meetings coming up, G-20, also a BRICS summit, and again, as if all the heads of the state, all the heads of governments come for his swearing in, then there can be a mini summit possibility there itself, and there can be bilateral talks. But final comments on the program, Professor Chaulia, immediate foreign policy challenges, and your pick for Minister of External Affairs. Immediate
challenge will be, with the drawdown. I'm expecting an increase in low-intensity warfare and jihadism across our border. So we will need to brace for that and be prepared for it and to be challenged. The other one is to continue to build our defenses across the LAC, the line of actual control on the Chinese side, so that they don't surprise us again like they did when Manmohan Singh was caught napping when Daulat Beg Oldie happened. So we need to be, prepared on that front. And I think I would say that we need to also reach out to Africa, Latin America, never neglect these rising regions. The world is changing. Can't think of any. Thank you very much, Mr. Sikri, Professor Chaulia, Mr. Manoharan and Mr. Dixit for joining us in this program. So several challenges as far as foreign policy issues is concerned for Narendra Modi government. Time will only tell that how he addresses these challenges. Thank you very much for joining us in this program. That's all we have for you. Namaskar.